with asking for what you want in difficult situations and saying no to people in difficult situations in ways that are somewhat tactful, to try to preserve the relationship, but try to get you what you want, and try to preserve your self-respect. And that's really the theme of this module, though now we have a couple more things that have been added in the new edition. So, introductory comment about this module. So many people feel that when they're unartful, ineffective, don't get what they want, it just does, things don't work out. The natural tendency seems to be to interpret there's something wrong with you. That that your basic program is corrupted in some way, some deep problem. And the approach here, like with the other modules, is that you might just not have the skills that other people are using when they get what they want, or when they say no effectively, or when they build relationships. So it's worth a shot to teach you the skills, some of which you got, some of which you didn't get, some of which you could improve on. And that's the idea, is to go over all these things that people do to be interpersonally effective. And it's just a less stigmatizing view and a more hopeful view, and I think a more practical and effective view for dealing with interpersonal relationships. It's amazing how many skills we don't have based on where we grew up or whatever it is, what we were exposed to. So this module, and again, I just want to remind you, what I'm doing here is introducing you to these skills. This is not a substitute for the manual, which gives them in greater detail and with a lot more ideas about how to teach them. I think it can help move forward to just get an intro to the skills. So this module is starts with handout number 1. And with this handout, it's really the overall goals of the module. And there's 3 overall goals of this module. One is to learn to be skillful in addressing conflict situations, difficult situations, encounters where you want to ask for something or say no. And that's really what most of the module was in the previous manual, but this updated edition, the 2nd edition, has these other 2 big goals in it. And the second one is how to build relationships and how to end destructive relationships. And the third one is going to be to walk the middle path, to find a balance in relationships so you're not overdoing it in one direction or another, and you can maintain them better. So there's these 3 big goals, and recommend you go over those with people. It's a starred handout. Here's another starred. The next starred handout is factors in the way of interpersonal effectiveness. And what these are is 5, 6 things that get in the way of being effective with people. So it helps kind of inventory that at the beginning of the module. So these are all these things that can get in the way, and it could lead to discussions in your group about why am I not effective, and it sort of can raise that question, which helps already to indicate to people that whatever is your current assumption might not be the whole case. It's interesting for people to hear from each other about this. So what are these things, just to quickly introduce? One thing, you might not have the skills. I mean, that's just one itself, and that's going to be addressed by teaching you the skills. A second one is that you just might not have gotten clear about what you want. So you haven't thought it through. And you get in an interpersonal situation when you think you're going to go after something, and then, but then you haven't thought through that the fact is there's something else you want in that situation that overrides what you were going to do. Like, let's say you were going to ask somebody for something, but they seem like they are not going to give it, and you just don't want to like rock the boat. So that's a higher priority for you. So it's like you haven't gotten clear what you want. So that's something you can do something about. Next, you have the skills, you know what you want, but your emotions are getting in the way. So you want to ask something of somebody that you haven't asked for a long time, and actually, as you ask for it, you get very angry. Or alternatively, you're not sure you have a right to ask for it, so as you start to ask for something, you become more guilty or ashamed, and it interferes with being effective in getting what you want. Next one, you forget what your long-term goals are. You thought you knew what you wanted, but now you have to give up your long-term goals because in the situation itself, you're swayed. The winds are blowing and you sort of bend and give way. Another thing is that you may be actually using the skills. You may know what you want. Emotions might not get in the way. And then, well, what is blocking you from getting what you want? Well, it could be reality. It could be that the other people are just not ready to give what you're asking for. The other people are not ready to take no for an answer. So it's important to point out to people that the reality of other people's needs and styles and desires could interfere with you getting what you want. And that is just important to know because people with severe emotion dysregulation often think that's never the option. That's never the truth. It's always that there's something wrong with them. Okay? And finally, thoughts and just the way emotions can get in the way, thoughts and beliefs can get in the way. You may have a myth that you don't have a right to pursue your goal. You don't have a right to cause trouble. You don't have a right to do this. Or on the other hand, maybe you have a myth, maybe you have a belief that you should say everything that you think because people, when you were growing up, made you suppress things. And that's going to interfere with being effective. So there's lots of things, and they're all addressed in this module, but this is just sort of taking an inventory with patients. And there's worksheets for each of these things for homework assignments. The next handout is kind of a subset of that, which is a list of myths that get in the way of being effective. They're broken down as myths that get in the way of getting your objective, going after it, myths that get in the way of keeping good relationships, and myths that get in the way of keeping good self-respect. And these are in the form of a checklist, and so you can have patients look at these, check off the ones that they sign on to, that they believe in, and then you could have discussions about these myths, including bring it to life in the class by creating debates about the myths where people are for and against the myth, and then they can try to come up with challenges to these myths when you find ones that are particularly important to somebody. All right, now, next starred handout, big important one, is we're moving into, well, I skipped a page there just to show we are moving now into obtaining objectives skillfully, which means obtaining your objective and keeping a good relationship if it matters to you and keeping your self-respect. So what this is going to be about is first clarifying your priorities. What I love about this skill is that it starts with breaking down an interpersonal encounter that's a difficult one, where you're asking or saying no. And you break it down, it already helps you if you break it down into 3 different types of objectives or priorities. One is objectives. So you clarify your priorities in advance. Like, what matters most to me? Is it matter most that I get what I want? Does it matter most that I keep a good relationship? Does it matter most if I keep my self-respect in this situation? If I can't have all 3, okay? And getting clear about that in advance already makes you more effective. But then the module teaches you if you're getting what you want is the most important thing, then we teach skills, 7 guidelines that are to an acronym of Dear Man. If you're trying to improve or maintain a good relationship, then the skills are going to be the GIVE skills, G-I-V-E. And if you're focusing on self-respect, that's a priority, and I hope it's your priority a lot of the time, there'll be the FAST, the FAST skills. So overall, you've got Dear Man, Give Fast. And then there, finally, in this section of the module is going to be factors to consider when deciding how intensely to push your agenda, how intensely to ask what you want, how firm to be in saying no, because it isn't sometimes obvious. So there's certain factors you can use to consider whether to push hard or not push so hard. And going over those is interesting. Okay? So the next handout is to now, in this section, clarifying your goals. So what does objectives effectiveness mean? And what does relationship effectiveness mean? And what does self-respect effectiveness mean? These are pretty self-explanatory, but really the way to teach this is to come up with situations. Start with one of your own that was a challenging moment for you in dealing with a situation, and show how many different ways there could be. I want to make a suggestion about teaching here. In every module, in every skill, you want to find ways over time to teach that are engaging. And that often means getting people's attention, because sometimes you have people who are, dysregulated in various ways, and they might be bored, they might be restless, they might be self-conscious, they might be angry, and so you've got to rise above that and just push forward and teach and grab people's attention in all kinds of ways. So I'll just give you a little example I sometimes give about teaching this module. One time I was teaching with a fellow teacher, Cindy, and we had a lot of patients, and there was, as usual, a lot of potential dysregulation in the room. And we decided to start the module like this. I told people to get your manual out or get the handouts out, and let's get started. And but Cindy wasn't present. And so she arrived about 2 minutes late, and I was already underway. And when she got there, she sat down opposite me. By the way, if you have a co-leader, it's best if you're opposite each other or something like that instead of next to each other. And so she sits opposite me, and then she pulls out handouts and books, and she said, okay, everybody, let's get started. I'm going to teach you about interpersonal effectiveness and relationships. And then I said, but Cindy, I've already started. I was going to teach. And then she said, no, Charlie, I was the one that was going to teach today. I said, no, we discussed this the other day. It's my turn to teach, and it's not your turn to teach. You're going to teach the next module, but we're starting a new module now. And she said, but I've prepared for it. You and I agreed I would teach. And we went back and forth, kind of like arguing. He said, she said, no real give on either side. And then it got more tense and more blameful. So she starts saying, but Charlie, and this is in front of all the patients, you have a terrible memory. So how can we count on the fact that that you think this, I think that? I think we're pretty sure that I'm right, if that's the case. And by the way, I mean, just because you're the boss doesn't mean you get to be the boss every minute. And so she's like starting to hit below the belt, and then I go back and I do the same thing, and we're going back and forth, and the patients are like really engaged. I mean, they're a little like, oh my God, the big leaders here are fighting. And then I suddenly stop and I stand up next to a whiteboard, and I said, I want to ask you guys, did you notice anything that Cindy did that was not very effective if she wanted to teach? And then I'll list the things that they say. Did you see anything that Charlie did, that I did, that was not very effective in saying no, that might make things worse? They list several things. Did you see anything Cindy did that was effective? Did you see anything Charlie did that was effective? Try to go over all of this, and then they come up with a lot of things, and then you can reinforce them. Say, you guys, you're right on target. You already know a lot of these. I knew it, but we're not going to skip this whole module. But you're going to find this very interesting because it's just what we've been talking about here. It's how do you get what you want? How do you say no? And we had Cindy trying to get what she wanted and me trying to